Sound of Disagreement. The tone arrived before any warning did. Mireille was 3 hours into a routine calibration sweep when every screen on Station 9 changed at once. No flicker, no chime, as though the station had simply decided to stop showing her anything else. A single number sat where her data feeds had been. It was already smaller than a number that size should start at. And it was falling. She had spent 6 years on this listening post cataloging a galaxy that mostly did not answer, patient the way an astronomer is patient with empty sky. The gas giant below turned red and slow past the viewport, indifferent to whatever had just reached across the dark to find her. The station's caretaker intelligence, Wren, reported that the signal carried no header, no point of origin, nothing but the falling number, and beneath it, a single sustained tone. The tone was not static. It was changing. She listened. Beneath the countdown ran a note that drifted, the way a held cord slides sharp before you're sure it's moved at all. It filled the small module wall to wall. It sat under her ribs. She turned the volume down, and it did not get quieter. Not really. Just further away, like something already inside the hull instead of outside it. She asked Wren to pull the archive. The archive gave her a graveyard. 40 years earlier, a relay station in a neighboring system had logged this same tone in its final hours. Rough at first, layered, almost chaotic, it had smoothed by degrees into something pure and single-noted. When it reached that purity, the relay went dark. No wreckage was ever found, no explanation offered, only silence, filed and forgotten, the way silence usually was out here. Mireille sat with that for a long moment. Then she let herself think the obvious thing. This was not a weapon counting down to detonation. It was a chorus, tuning itself. She spent the next hours doing what 6 years of listening had trained her to do. Stop assuming. Start comparing. She laid the current signal against 100 fragments Station 9 had gathered over the years, transmissions never meant for human ears. A pattern emerged, and she did not like it. The tone was not one voice, it was many, each thread converging toward the others, and somewhere past the dark, a body of listeners had been gathering everything humanity had ever broadcast, every argument, every election, every song sung out of tune in a crowd, running it all through some process of judgment. The countdown was not time until an attack. It was time until a verdict finished forming. It is a strange thing about a species that it rarely names its own defining trait correctly. Humanity had spent its history certain its worst quality was its capacity for conflict, and had built whole philosophies around apologizing for it. Nobody had ever suggested that the same restless refusal to agree might be the one thing a perfect, unanimous chorus could not survive contact with. Wren found the thread that made the shape of it clear. 11 months earlier, a corrupted archive burst had briefly leaked from Station 9's public relay. Old, unfiltered recordings of Earth chatter, arguments layered on top of each other, no resolution offered. In the signal logs from that week, buried in noise nobody had flagged, the converging tone had spiked into dissonance and lost its shape entirely. The tone outside was nearly pure now, close enough that Wren had stopped rounding the number when it reported the pitch, because the decimals had started to matter. Mireille could hear it evening out even through the bulkhead, the way a room full of arguing voices thins one by one into a single held note right before it stops. She did not have long. She went to the archive the Station 9 had kept of the people who had built it. Among the files was a decade-old argument between her late mentor Iris Calloway and a colleague who had never once agreed with her about anything. Not polished. Two people talking over each other about how to read an ambiguous signal, neither willing to concede, both certain the other was reckless. Iris had died before it was ever settled. Mireille had kept the file for years without being able to say why. She built a broadcast out of it, out of a dozen fragments like it, pulled from the open record, a parliamentary session mid-shouting match, two critics tearing the same film apart in opposite directions, a street argument about a statue nobody could agree whether to keep standing. She smoothed nothing, resolved nothing. She sent it raw, aimed along the bearing the tone had come from, and watched the station's reserves drop as the transmitter drank power meant to last the month. Nothing happened for a long moment. She let herself imagine that nothing would. Then, the tone outside cracked. It did not vanish. It fractured the way ice fractures under sudden cold into a jagged spread of frequencies that refused to settle. The sound through the bulkhead went from one note to a dozen at once, all of them wrong together, all of them alive. The countdown stuttered, reversed a fraction, began climbing instead of falling. Wren reported carefully that the pattern now matched nothing in the archive, no precedent. Nobody had ever sent this chorus contradiction on purpose before. Mireille sat very still and listened to it fight itself, and for the first time since the number had appeared, she let herself breathe all the way out. The number climbed a long while, then steadied far short of zero, and held. Mireille sat in the low red light of the gas giant's reflection. The tone outside had not gone away. It was still out there, patient, still gathering, and someday it would try again to smooth humanity's noise into a single note it could finally act on. When that day came, the answer would have to be built again, out of whatever genuine disagreement still existed to send. She thought of Iris, mid-argument, refusing to yield a point she believed in to a friend she respected, neither of them ever finding out which one had been right. It was, Mireille decided, as fine a thing as any to be remembered by. The station's reserves would take weeks to recover. She did not resent the cost. Somewhere past the dark, a chorus that had never learned how to disagree with itself was still listening. For now, it had nothing pure left to act on.